3 days before I was supposed to move into the workshop apartment my best friend left me, my son Kevin called and said those words that still make my blood boil. "Dad, we're already here. We made ourselves at home." I'm Carl Martinez, 57 years old, and I thought I was done dealing with this kind of nonsense. I was standing in my old house, boxes packed everywhere, movers scheduled for Saturday. It was Wednesday. The place looked like a tornado hit it, furniture covered in sheets, my whole life stuffed into cardboard boxes labeled kitchen, bedroom, garage stuff. "What do you mean you're already there?" I asked. "At Steve's place." "Well, your place now, I guess," Kevin said. I could hear kids screaming in the background, TV blaring some cartoon, Susan yelling about something. "I lost my HVAC job 3 months ago, Dad. Our lease is up next week. We didn't have anywhere else to go." My chest got tight. Steve Rodriguez had been my business partner and closest friend for 25 years. Built our auto shops from nothing. Worked side by side through good times and bad. Went through divorces together. Celebrated when business picked up. Worried when it didn't. The man taught me everything I knew about running a shop. When Steve died of a heart attack last spring, I was devastated. We'd been planning our retirement together. He was going to keep the shop going part-time. I was going to focus on classic car restoration. We had it all figured out. Then one Tuesday morning, his neighbor found him in his driveway, keys still in his hand. Steve had no kids, no wife left. His ex took half in the divorce 15 years back, but she'd moved to Florida and never looked back. In his will, he left me his garage workshop, 2 bays with a full professional setup and a small apartment above it. It wasn't huge, maybe 800 square feet total for the living space, but it had everything I needed for retirement. Professional tool collection that took Steve 20 years to build, hydraulic lift, air compressor, welding station, and space for the classic car restoration I'd been dreaming about for years. "Kevin, I haven't even moved in yet," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The movers are coming in 3 days." I know, but we needed a place now. You understand, right? You're not going to let your grandkids be homeless." The grandkids. Amy was 8, Alex was 5. I loved those kids more than life itself. Amy had Steve's curiosity, always asking questions about how engines worked, why cars made certain noises. Alex just liked sitting in the driver's seat of whatever car we were working on, pretending to drive to the moon. But this wasn't about them. This was about Kevin making decisions that affected my life without asking me. Again. "How did you even get in?" I asked. "Steve gave me a spare key years ago when you two went to that big car show in Vegas, and I watched the place. You remember, I was between apartments and needed somewhere to crash for a few days." Remembered? That was 10 years ago. Kevin was 23, just out of trade school, couldn't keep a job or an apartment for more than 6 months. Steve felt sorry for him, gave him odd jobs around the shop. Kevin was supposed to return that key when he moved out. "I'll be there tomorrow," I said. "We need to talk about this." "Sure, Dad. See you then. Hey, bring some groceries if you can. We're kind of running low on cash until I find something." He hung up before I could say anything else. I sat down on my couch, the only piece of furniture not wrapped up and ready to move, and stared at those boxes. Something just gave way inside me. Not broke exactly, but cracked like old leather under pressure. I'd spent 57 years being the guy who helps out. When Kevin needed money for trade school, I gave it to him. When he couldn't make rent on his first apartment, I covered it. When he totaled his truck driving drunk at 25, guess who co-signed for a new one? When he married Susan and needed a down payment on their place, I emptied half my savings account. I gave and gave until I realized he expected it. expected me to fix whatever mess he'd made. Steve used to tell me, "Carl, that boy needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet." He'd say it while we worked on engines, our hands black with grease, talking about life and what we wanted to do when we got old. "You keep bailing him out. He's never going to grow up." But Kevin was my son, my only kid. His mother left when he was 12, packed up one morning while we were at work, and moved back to California with some guy she met online. I raised Kevin by myself, working double shifts to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. Maybe I did too much for him. Maybe I never learned when to say no. The next morning, I drove across town to Steve's place. I'd been there 1,000 times over the years, but it felt different now. Different knowing it was supposed to be mine. Different knowing my son had just moved in like he owned Aya. Steve's building was in an industrial area that was slowly going residential. Old warehouses being converted to lofts, new coffee shops opening up next to auto parts stores. His place was a converted garage complex, 2 shop bays downstairs with the apartment upstairs. Nothing fancy, but solid. Steve always said he liked it because he could work on cars and still be home. I parked on the street and just sat there for a minute. Kevin's beat-up Honda was in the driveway next to Susan's minivan. There were kids' toys scattered across the small front yard. A plastic slide, some bikes, a wagon full of random junk. It looked like a family lived there. It looked like they belonged. When I opened the door with my key, the one the estate lawyer had given me, I stopped dead in my tracks. The workshop was full. Not just full of people, but full of stuff that didn't belong. Kids' toys scattered across Steve's main workbench, the one where we'd rebuilt probably 200 engines over the years. There was a playpen set up where the engine hoist used to be. Boxes of clothes and kitchen stuff stacked against the tool cabinets. The place smelled like fast food and dirty diapers instead of motor oil and metal shavings. Kevin came walking out of the upstairs apartment with Alex on his shoulders. "Dad, you made it. Come on up. We'll show you around." I just stood there looking at what used to be Steve's pride and joy. "Where's all the equipment, Kevin?" "Oh, we had to move some stuff around to make room. Most of it's in storage. There's a place about 10 minutes from here, really cheap. We can get it back out whenever you want to use it." Storage. Steve's life's work was sitting in some storage unit because my son needed to make room for his junk. "Kevin, where's the Snap-on toolbox?" That toolbox was Steve's pride and joy, a massive red chest with every drawer organized exactly the way he liked it. Socket sets arranged by size, wrenches laid out like surgical instruments. He'd been building that collection for 20 years. "That big red thing?" "Yeah, that's in storage, too. It was taking up half the shop." I walked over to where it used to sit. There was a cheap plastic table there now with Susan's sewing machine on it. Fabric scraps everywhere, like she was running some kind of business out of my workshop. "Dad, come see the apartment," Kevin said, putting Alex down. "Susan fixed it up really nice." I followed him upstairs, my stomach getting tighter with every step. The apartment was small, but Steve had kept it neat, clean, simple. Now it looked like a tornado hit it. Clothes everywhere, dishes piled in the sink, kids' stuff covering every surface. The smell hit me first. Dirty diapers, old food, something that might have been cat litter even though they didn't have a cat. Susan was on the couch feeding the baby. I'd forgotten she was pregnant again. This one looked maybe 6 months old. "Hi, Carl," she said without looking up. "Sorry about the mess. It's hard to keep up with 3 kids." 3 kids? When did they have a 3rd kid? "This is Emma," Kevin said, like he was proud. "She was born right after I lost my job. Perfect timing, right?" I stared at this baby I'd never met, my granddaughter, and felt something twist in my chest. How long had it been since I'd seen them? How long since Kevin had called me for anything other than money? Dad, sit down. Let's talk about how this is going to work. How this is going to work? Like it was already decided. Kevin, I haven't moved in yet. The movers are coming Saturday. Right, but there's plenty of room for all of us. You don't need the whole workshop. You're just one guy. We're a family of 5 now. We need more space than you do. 5. When I was Kevin's age, I was raising him alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, working 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat. I never had the luxury of assuming someone else would take care of us. What about your lease? You said it was up next week. Yeah, we couldn't afford to renew. Rent went up $400 a month. With me not working and the new baby, we just couldn't swing it. Susan looked up from the baby. We've been sleeping in the car some nights when we couldn't stay with friends. It's been really hard, Carl. The car. My grandkids sleeping in a car. I felt that familiar guilt creeping in, the same guilt that had been making my decisions for 33 years. I need to see the workshop again, I said. Back downstairs, I really looked at what they'd done. Steve's workbench, the one we'd built together from solid maple, had scratches all over the top. Deep gouges like someone had been using it to cut things. The pegboard where he kept his most used tools was now holding kitchen utensils and kids' art supplies. In the corner where we used to keep current project cars, there were boxes stacked to the ceiling. I opened one. Photo albums, old dishes, stuff that looked like it came from a garage sale. Kevin, how long have you been here? Just a couple weeks? We would have called, but we knew you were busy with the estate stuff and everything. A couple weeks. They'd been living in my inheritance for a couple weeks and nobody told me. Where's Steve's Mustang? Steve had a 1969 Mustang Mach 1 that we'd been restoring for 3 years. It was about 80% done, just needed paint and interior work. Steve always said that car was going to be his retirement project. Kevin looked uncomfortable. It's outside. We needed the space. I walked to the side door and looked out. There was the Mustang, sitting in the weather. No cover, no protection. Bird droppings on the hood. Rust already starting to show around the wheel wells. Kevin, that car's worth 40 grand when it's finished. Yeah, well, we didn't know what else to do with it. It's not like it runs. It didn't run because we were waiting on parts. Parts that were supposed to arrive this month. Parts I'd already paid for. I went back inside and sat down on an overturned crate. There was nowhere else to sit. The shop stool we used was gone. Where's all the equipment, really? I told you, storage. Which storage place? It's called A Storage or something. Over on Van Buren. How much is that costing? Kevin shifted around, wouldn't look at me. It's like $200 a month, but that's temporary, just until we get settled. $200 a month, to store the tools that should be in the shop I owned. Who's paying for it? Silence. Kevin? Well, we figured you wouldn't mind covering it for a few months, just until I find work. I stood up. You figured I wouldn't mind. Dad, don't get upset. It's not that much money. Not that much money. I was looking at maybe $2,000 a month for an apartment I couldn't live in because they were already there, plus $200 a month storage for my own equipment, plus whatever utilities they were running up. Kevin, this is my workshop. I know, but we're family, right? Family helps family. Family helps family. I'd been hearing that my whole life. When Kevin got arrested for underage drinking, family helps family. When he wrecked his car, family helps family. When he couldn't make rent, when he needed a co-signer, when he knocked up his girlfriend and needed money for a wedding, when he got laid off from his last 3 jobs. I need to think about this, I said. Think about what? Dad, we've got nowhere else to go. I looked around the shop one more time. This place where Steve and I had spent thousands of hours, where we'd solved problems, built engines, dreamed about retirement, where I was supposed to spend my golden years working on cars and finally having some peace. "I'll call you tomorrow," I said. "Dad, wait." But I was already walking to my truck. I needed air. I needed to think. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't going to guilt me into doing something I didn't want to do. I drove to Helen Foster's house. Helen had been Steve's neighbor for 15 years, helped him when he got sick, brought him meals when he was too tired to cook. She was about the only person left who knew both of us well enough to tell me the truth. "Carl," she said when she opened the door, "I was wondering when I'd see you." "They moved in, Helen." "I know. I saw them last week." "Last week?" I sat down hard in Helen's kitchen chair. "They told me a couple weeks." "Carl, they've been there almost a month. I saw them moving stuff in right after the funeral. I thought you knew." A month? They'd been living in my workshop for a month, lying about it, and nobody thought to tell me. Helen poured me a cup of coffee without asking. She was in her 70s, but sharp as a tack, retired from managing a bank downtown. She didn't mess around. "What are you going to do about it?" she asked. "I don't know. Kevin says they have nowhere else to go. Susan just had another baby. They've got 3 kids now." "And where were you supposed to live?" That stopped me. I'd been so focused on Kevin's problems that I hadn't really thought about my own situation. "I guess I'll have to stay in my house for now." "The house you already sold?" Right. I'd forgotten. The buyers were supposed to take possession in 2 weeks. I'd already signed all the paperwork. "Carl, that's your property. Steve left it to you, not to Kevin." "I know, but nothing. Let me ask you something. If some stranger broke into that workshop and moved in, what would you do?" "I'd call the police." "So why is it different because it's Kevin?" I didn't have a good answer for that. Helen leaned forward. "Steve talked to me about you, you know, especially near the end. He was worried about Kevin taking advantage of you. That surprised me. Steve never said much about Kevin directly, but I'd caught him shaking his head a few times when Kevin came by the shop asking for money." "What did he say?" "He said you were the best friend he ever had, but you had a blind spot when it came to that boy. He said Kevin never learned to stand on his own because you never let him fall." I stared into my coffee. "His mother left. I didn't want him to feel abandoned again. So instead you taught him that someone would always rescue him." That hit hard, because it was true. Every time Kevin got in trouble, I was there. Every time he made a bad decision, I helped him clean up the mess. I thought I was being a good father. Turns out I might have been doing the opposite. "What would Steve want you to do?" Helen asked. I knew the answer to that. Steve would want me to stand up for myself. Steve would want me to claim what was rightfully mine. Steve had worked 30 years to build that workshop, and he left it to me because he trusted me to take care of it. "I should ask them to leave," I said. "You should tell them to leave. There's a difference." I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that Mustang sitting in the weather, about Steve's tools locked away in storage, about the workshop that was supposed to be my retirement dream turning into someone else's living room. The next morning, Kevin called me. "Dad, I was thinking, maybe you could help us out with the first month's rent somewhere, just until I get back on my feet." "First month's rent where?" "Well, we've been looking at apartments, and there's this place that might work. It's $1,500 a month, but if you could help with the deposit and first month, we could probably swing it after that." $1,500 a month, plus deposit. Probably $4,500 just to get them started, and that was assuming they could actually pay rent after the first month, which based on Kevin's track record seemed unlikely. "Kevin, why don't you just stay where you are for a while, until you find work?" "Really? Dad, that would be amazing. I knew you'd understand." After I hung up, I realized what I'd just done. I'd basically given them permission to stay in my workshop indefinitely. What was wrong with me? That afternoon, Helen called. "Carl, you need to get over here. Now." "What's wrong?" "Just come." I drove over to find Helen standing in Steve's driveway holding an envelope. "This was in your mailbox," she said. I opened it. Electric bill. Arizona Public Service. $847. $847? I stared at the number. For 1 month? They've been running space heaters around the clock, and that air compressor's been running constantly. I can hear it from my house. I looked at the bill again. It was addressed to Steve Rodriguez, but there was a note stuck to it. Forwarding mail to new owner per family request. Family request. Kevin had called the electric company and told them he was family, living in the house. He was getting my mail forwarded to him. "Helen, what else has been delivered here?" "Everything. Mail, packages. The parts delivery for the Mustang came last week." "What parts delivery?" "Big box from AutoZone. Kevin signed for it. The parts I'd ordered for Steve's Mustang. The ones I'd paid for with my own credit card. Kevin had signed for them like he lived there." "Carl, there's something else." Helen looked uncomfortable. "I heard Kevin talking to some guy yesterday about selling some tools. Said he needed quick cash for baby formula." My stomach dropped. Selling tools? I couldn't hear everything, but they were looking at that welding setup in the shop. Steve's Miller TUG welder, worth at least $3,000. We'd bought it together 5 years ago when we decided to get serious about restoration work. I walked over to the shop and looked through the window. The welder was gone. I knocked on the door. Kevin answered, holding baby Emma. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Where's the welder, Kevin?" His face went red. "What welder?" "The Miller TIG welder that was in the corner." "Oh, that old thing. It wasn't working anyway. I sold it to help pay for baby stuff." "It was working fine. We used it 3 weeks before Steve died." "Well, it wasn't working when I tried it." "How much did you get for it?" "Like $500. Some guy on Craigslist." $500. For a $3,000 piece of equipment that didn't belong to him. "Kevin, that wasn't yours to sell." "Dad, we needed diapers. You want your granddaughter to sit in dirty diapers?" There it was again. The guilt trip. The granddaughter I barely knew because Kevin only called when he needed something. "I want to see the receipt," I said. "What receipt?" "From the sale. I want to know who you sold it to." Kevin shifted Emma to his other arm. "I don't think I kept it." "You sold a $3,000 welder and didn't keep a receipt?" "Dad, why are you being like this? It's just a tool." Just a tool. Steve had saved for months to buy that welder. We'd spent hours learning how to use it properly, practicing on scrap metal until we could lay perfect beads. It wasn't just a tool. It was part of our dreams. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. When had he become this person? When had he started thinking that other people's property was his to dispose of when he needed quick cash? "Kevin, you need to move out." "What?" "You heard me. You need to find another place to live." "Dad, we can't. We have nowhere to go." "You had somewhere to go. You chose to come here instead without asking me." Susan appeared at the top of the stairs. "What's going on?" "Your father-in-law wants to kick us out," Kevin said loud enough for her to hear. "Carl, we have a newborn. You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. This is my workshop. Steve left it to me. You're living here without permission? You're selling equipment that doesn't belong to you, and you're running up bills in my name." "We're family," Kevin said. "Family helps family. Family totally also respects family. You've been lying to me about how long you've been here. You're intercepting my mail. You sold my equipment without asking. That's not how family treats family." Kevin's expression changed. The fake surprise was gone, replaced by anger. "Fine. You want us gone? We'll go. But don't expect to see your grandkids again. Don't expect us to come running when you're old and need help. You're choosing some dead guy's junk over your own blood." The words hit like a punch to the gut, but for the first time in years, I didn't apologize. I didn't back down. "You have 30 days, I said, and walked away. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. Kevin called me every day, sometimes multiple times. Susan left voicemails crying about how they couldn't find anywhere to live with 3 kids and bad credit. They sent me photos of the kids looking sad, holding signs that said, "We love you, Grandpa." My brother Mike called. "Carl, what's wrong with you? They're family. You really going to put your own grandkids on the street?" My cousin Rita called. "I heard what you're doing." Mom's rolling over in her grave. "Family takes care of family." I tried to explain. The lies, the stolen equipment, the bills, the complete disrespect for Steve's memory and my property. But all they heard was, "Man kicks out daughter-in-law with newborn baby." On day 20, Kevin tried a different approach. He showed up at my door with just Alex. No Susan, no other kids. "Dad, can we talk? Just you and me?" I let them in. Alex ran to my old recliner and started watching cartoons like nothing had happened. "Dad, I'm sorry about the welder. I was desperate. Emma needed medicine and we didn't have insurance." "You could have called me, Kevin. You could have asked." I know, but you've done so much for us already. I didn't want to be a burden." A burden? Right. "Look, I found a job. HVAC company in Scottsdale. Good benefits, decent pay. I start Monday." "That's great, Kevin, really." "The thing is, they want me to work weekends for the first month. Training period. If we had to move right now, find a place, get the kids settled, I don't know if I could handle the job too." I looked at Alex, who was completely absorbed in his cartoon. 5 years old, no idea his world was about to change again. "What are you asking, Kevin?" "Just a few more months. Let me get established at this job, save up some money. Then we'll find our own place." A few more months. I'd heard that before. "The 30 days stands," I said. Kevin's face hardened. "Fine. But when you're old and alone, don't come crying to us." He took Alex and left. The kid waved goodbye like we were still friends. Day 30 came on a Friday. I showed up at 8 a.m. with Helen and a locksmith. Kevin's car was gone. Susan's minivan was gone. The driveway was empty. I used my key to get in. The place was destroyed. Not just messy, destroyed. Food ground into the concrete floor of the shop. Holes punched in the drywall upstairs. The toilet was clogged and had overflowed, probably days ago from the smell. On Steve's workbench, someone had carved, "Thanks for nothing, Grandpa," deep into the maple top. In the apartment, there was a note on the kitchen counter. "Hope you're happy now. You chose a dead man over your living family. The kids will never understand why their grandfather hates them." I stood there reading that note over and over until Helen took it out of my hands and threw it away. "Don't," she said. "Don't let him get in your head." The cleanup took 2 weeks. I had to hire professionals for some of it. The water damage upstairs, refinishing the workbench, replacing drywall. Insurance covered most of it, but not the emotional cost of seeing Steve's sanctuary treated like garbage. Slowly, I brought the tools back from storage. I organized them the way Steve and I always had. Socket sets by size, wrenches laid out in order. I hung the photos back up. Us at car shows, fishing trips, the day we opened the second shop. I found the Mustang parts Kevin had signed for and started working on this car. It felt good to have something to do with my hands, something that wasn't about family drama or hurt feelings, just metal and bolts and the satisfaction of making something work. Kevin didn't call for 2 months. Then one day in November, he texted, "Found a place. 3-bedroom duplex in Glendale. Kids have their own rooms. New job is working out." I stared at that message for a long time before replying. "That's good news. Can we talk sometime?" "Maybe. Not yet." 3 months after that, he asked if he could bring the kids by. I said yes, but just the kids. Alex and Amy came on a Saturday afternoon. Emma was walking now, getting into everything. They were amazed by the shop, the tools, the car I was working on. Alex wanted to sit in the driver's seat again, just like old times. Amy asked smart questions about the engine, remembered things Steve had taught her before he died. "Grandpa Steve said cars are just puzzles with parts," she told me. Seriously, Kevin stood in the doorway the whole time, not coming in, not really talking to me, just watching his kids explore their grandfather's workshop. As they were leaving, he said, "It looks good in here, like how Steve always kept it." "Thanks. I'm sorry about the workbench, about all of it." I nodded. We weren't ready to hug or get emotional, but it was something. "Can they come back sometime?" "Yeah, they can come back." After they left, I sat in Steve's old chair, my chair now, and looked around the workshop. The Mustang was almost finished, just needed some trim work and a final tune-up. The tools were clean and organized. The concrete floor was stained and scarred, but solid. It wasn't perfect. The workbench would always have those scars carved into it. The apartment upstairs still smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals. Some of Steve's tools were gone forever, sold or lost during the chaos. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, I had something that belonged completely to me, something I didn't have to share or negotiate or compromise about. A place where I could work with my hands, remember my friend, and maybe teach my grandkids about engines and life and standing up for yourself. I'd spent 57 years making space for other people, making room, making do. Steve had given me permission to take up space, to say no, to choose myself when I needed to. The workshop smelled like motor oil and metal shavings again. It smelled like peace. And that, I realized, was worth fighting for. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them solve their own problems. A man who stands for nothing will fall for anything, even from his own family.